All right, good morning, everybody. Time is now 9:30 a.m. Date is Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, and it is time for the regularly scheduled business meeting. Would the other commissioners please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, commissioners. It's my understanding that there's been no request for online public comment today. Is that correct? Is there any public comment from those in attendance in the Bollinger Room? Seeing none. We do have one change to the agenda this morning. This would be item number 4 under work session. This is docket number 2021.02.019, Polson Taxi Company LLC, application for Class C certificate of compliance to consider scheduling a show cause hearing. This matter has been deferred to July 27th, 2021, and that is the only change to the agenda. So we'll now move into action item number 1, approval of the commission minutes for the week of June 28, 2021. Commissioner Pinocci has moved to adopt the commission minutes for the week of June 28, 2021. Is there a second?
Second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair has seconded that. Discussion, changes? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the commission minutes from June 28, 2021 signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. I would note for the record that all 5 PSC commissioners are present this morning in the Bollinger Room. Action item number 2. This is staff out-of-state travel. Mr. Rosequist, I presume you're handling this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners. Staff would request that the commission approve out-of-state travel for Joel Tierney to travel to Deadwood, South Dakota on August 16th through the 20th, 2021 to attend a national meeting of the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives. The expected cost of this out-of-state travel is $1,545, and it will be covered out of the Pipeline Safety Federal Grant. Staff recommends approval, Mr. Chairman.
All right, discussion or motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in keeping with the keeping staff up to date on requirements to do their job properly, especially in terms of federal regulations, I move to allow this travel to proceed.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell has moved to approve staff travel for Joel Tierney in the amount of $1,545, which will be funded from the Federal Pipeline Safety Grant. Is there a second?
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Johnson has seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, Commissioner O'Donnell's motion is adopted unanimously. All right, that concludes our action items. Let's move into work session items. Let's move to item number 1, which is docket number 2021.03.038. This is Northwestern Energy. This is Northwestern Energy's natural gas universal system benefits charge rate adjustment tracker. We're here to discuss and act on Northwestern's request to adjust the USB rate. Ms. Gobert, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. On March 31st, 2021, Northwestern Energy filed its annual application to adjust its natural gas universal systems benefit charge rates. The application requests to cover revenues of about $2.8 million from March 1st, 2021 to April 30th, 2022. The total revenues requested consist of about $3.7 million for 2021 budgeted expenditures. This would result in a USB rate increase of about 3 cents per month for a typical residential natural gas user using 100 therms per month. Although the actual amount will vary with actual usage. On April 27th, 2021, the commission approved Northwestern's recovery on an interim basis. Staff has analyzed the application and recommends approving it on a final basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion or a motion? Commissioner Panoche?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with natural gas rates at an all-time low, the ratepayer is going to have a question of why would rates go up when we've got the lowest rates of natural gas in years? How do we answer that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Panoche, this increase is in regards to next year's budget. So the application takes into account the 2 previous years' expenditures and how much was spent. So last year there was an over recovery of about 700,000, and that is due to the pandemic and not some of the programs not being utilized fully. So Northwestern Energy takes into account projected customer usage, weather, and those rates in order to project the expected budget for next year. So I don't know exactly how the cost of gas would factor into that, but I do know that's how Northwestern takes into account how much money or how much they project the budget to be in the upcoming year. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Discussion or a motion, Vice Chair Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve staff recommendation in this docket.
All right, Vice Chair Johnson has made a motion to approve staff recommendation. Commissioner O'Donnell, seconds. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the Vice Chair's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, work session item number 2. This is commission initiated. Investigation of electric transmission and distribution line technology. We're here to consider opening a commission-led investigation of transmission and distribution line technology and developing a commission policy on the use of advanced conductors. Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm actually here today just to provide assistance. I believe Commissioner Panoche will be providing the motion and opening the discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Commissioner Panoche.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In today's work session, I'm asking the commission to consider to help lead the U.S. effort increasing the grid's efficiency. Opening an investigative docket to study electric transmission and distribution technology of advanced conductors, including aluminum conductor composite core ACCC advanced conductors. An investigative docket on the topic would provide a vehicle for the commission to direct data requests to utilities and other stakeholders, and thereby develop a formal written record of specifications and capabilities of advanced conductors like the ACCC. The current state of conductors across Montana grid could be improved, and wildfire and safety risk associated with existing infrastructure also could be improved. I'm asking the commissioners to adopt a policy to use advanced conductors in Montana. The content and construction of that policy could be informed by the record developed in an investigation. I'm asking the commission to vote yes on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll treat that as a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I missed a second.
Okay, that Commissioner Panoche's motion has been seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell. Discussion? Commissioner Fielder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to segregate this into the initiation of an investigation and then take up the discussion about adopting a policy after we see the results of that investigation. So I'll move to segregate the motion so that we are segregating out the adoption of a policy at this time, just considering the initiation of an investigation.
Okay. I'm not sure that needs a second, but I'll second it in case it does.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner O'Donnell?
that was my understanding of the motion as presented, was that the policy would follow the investigation, as Commissioner Pinocci here referred to it.
So Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Fielder, that was my understanding of what we'd be considering today, but I'm not sure Commissioner Pinocci's motion articulated that. If Commissioner Pinocci would like to maybe withdraw his motion and clarify that what he's proposing today is to open a commission-led investigation with the eye towards developing a commission policy.
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, we're having an investigation to consider adopting a policy thereafter.
Okay, do you want to withdraw your motion and restate?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion and restate that. Okay.
All right.
So-
So Commissioner Pinocci has moved to open a commission-led investigation of transmission and distribution line technology with an eye towards developing a commission policy on the use of advanced conductors. Is there a second for that?
Second.
That has been seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Fielder?
Mr. Chairman, do I need to withdraw the motion to segregate then, or is
No,
that
because
moot?
the underlying motion was withdrawn.
I'm quite satisfied with the restated motion. Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell and Pinocci.
All right, I'm going to support this motion as restated. I do believe it's a worthwhile endeavor of the commission to look into transmission distribution line technology and improvements with an eye towards gathering public input in those areas so that we can look at commission policy moving forward. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to, I too will support the motion. I want to point out that 2 legislative sessions ago, this commission had presented to both houses a resolution that encouraged regulated utilities to identify and when appropriate to deploy new and innovative technologies. So our movement into this area in a proactive manner is simply consistent with policy that we have in fact promoted. And I think for us to practice what we preach is certainly appropriate. And I would hope that this would set the stage for us to continue to be proactive in terms of identifying new technologies that might in fact further us in our endeavors to provide reliable, affordable, and sustainable utility services through our regulatory policies, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Additional discussion? Commissioner Fielder?
Mr. Chairman, my only concern about this is just staff workload and balancing the workload with our statutory responsibilities that are before us now. And so, with the strategic planning we've adopted, the executive director would balance those workloads. But since we do not have an executive director yet, how do you anticipate balancing the workload so that this receives some priority but doesn't necessarily inhibit the statutory work that's in progress?
Commissioner Fielder, I appreciate that comment, and I believe it was directed to me to answer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So in advance of today's meeting, I spoke with our acting chief legal counsel and legal staff about this matter, and I'm assured perhaps that staff is able to undertake this proceeding while meeting our statutory and regulatory duties, which I would consider this, if adopted, to be part of our regulatory duties. So I've been assured that staff can balance this.
I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for checking that out. And I just want to thank Commissioner Pinocci for bringing this forward because The informational meeting that was held about 2 weeks ago was very, very informative and interesting. It was engaging the parties that were at the table. I think had a very good exchange of information with the commission. And it is a timely and important issue. And I'm grateful to Commissioner Pinocci for spearheading this and leading out on this one. It's a very, very important and good topic. I think that I'm hopeful that we can find consensus across the board, across the spectrum of stakeholders that are interested in energy issues in Montana. It just appears to be a really positive path forward for increasing the reliability of the grid as well as efficiencies in it, and also seems to have some benefits for wildfire resilience. So I'm really looking forward to the outcome of not only the investigation, but the potential of all the parties to work together toward improving our energy future here in Montana.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Additional discussion, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yes, just to point out that Commissioner Fielder's concern about impeding the other work of the commission. Most of the work of the commission is time sensitive, a certain period of time to do things. Nothing in this motion indicates that there is a particular period of time. So therefore, it would certainly not get in the way of other procedural deadlines that the commission has.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Commissioner Pinocci's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. All right, work session item number 3. This is docket numbers 2021.05, 0.070, 0.071, 0.072, 0.077, and 0.079. Phillips 66 and Cenex oil pipeline index filings. To take final action, Mr. Tierney.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I had detailed in a memo last week the 5 filings for Phillips 66 and Cenex pipeline. These are the annual filings that come in under the oil pipeline index, which is a methodology that FERC had developed, but the commission adopted back in 2007. They make their yearly filings to have yearly rate changes. I've done an analysis, detailed that with each rate change in the memo. They have complied with this methodology, and I would recommend that the commission approve these 5 filings as filed with an August 1st effective date.
So, Mr. Attorney, just to clarify, you're proposing that we move these all as one motion?
I believe they could all be done as one action. That's what we've done in the past with them.
All right.
They could be 5 different, however the commission's pleasure would be.
Okay, but an historic practice has been to move them together.
Mhm.
All right, is it Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wish to move to adopt a staff's recommendation on this issue, the docket item.
And to move all of the
Yes,
filings as one motion?
yes, sir.
Okay, is there a second for that?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fielder has seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
As I read the reports, Joel, very comprehensively done. Good job on that.
Thank you.
But it seemed to me that in years past, when we have reconciled the rates to that, they have increased each year by a couple pennies. This one, it seems to me, is a very significant reduction, which is always a heartening thing to see. So I thank you for doing all the math on that and pointing all that out. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it very much.
Thank you.
Additional discussion? I would second Commissioner O'Donnell's sentiments. This was a very well done staff memo, very detailed and thorough and easily understandable. I appreciate your work on this. It was a very well done job. Thank you. Additional discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
All right, we have deferred work session item number 4 to July 27th. That brings us to work session item number 5. This is docket numbers 2017.08.066 and 2017.12.090. This is AT&T and Sprint. This is the consolidated complaint against Ronan Telephone Company. We're here to make a decision on the appropriate statute of limitations on AT&T and Sprint's complaints. Do we have any staff available? Mr. Ogalla, I didn't see you there.
Chair Brown, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Before you today is a very narrow decision. Commissioners need to make a decision on which statute of limitations, if any, should apply to the complaints between Ronan, Sprint, and AT&T. Essentially, the parties are at a closed universe of solutions here. Ronan, on one hand, argues that the 2-year statute of limitations should apply that is required for obligations that arise from statutory liability. On the other hand, they argue that the commission should find that its declaratory ruling that it issued a year and a half ago now should only apply prospectively. And in that circumstance, I think it would render the statute of limitations issue not necessarily moot, but not appropriate for resolution at this time. In the alternative, Sprint and Ronan argue that an 8-year statute of limitations should apply based on statute of limitations for contracts or other written instruments. As you remember, staff's recommendation kind of split the gap here. We don't think that either the statutory liability statute of limitations or the contractual statute of limitations are appropriate, and that the 5-year statute of limitations, which is kind of a catch-all requirement when there are no other statutes of limitations which should otherwise apply, should govern the commission's decision. That being said, the issues are very well briefed. This is a pretty ambiguous area in my mind legally. So I think the commissioners have quite a bit of space to make a decision that would be reasonably supported in the range of 2 to 5 to 8 years. The only other thing I note is that this is a narrow decision this morning. We're only deciding on the statute of limitations question. And my assumption is that after the commission makes a decision on this issue, that the parties would take that decision and either resolve this proceeding with settlement or proceed to judicial review if they don't agree with our statute of limitations decision. That's speculation, but I bring this up to note that this isn't a final resolution of these complaints. It's only making a determination on the statute of limitations. So with that, stand for any questions.
Mr. Rogala, Mr. Chair Brown, I have a question for you. I believe the 2021 Montana legislature passed and the governor signed into law statute of limitations bill that is congruent or at least related to the issue before us. Is that correct? Can you propound on that? Can you propound on that, please?
Yes. So the legislature passed SB 183, which requires a 2-year statute of limitations for folks like Sprint and AT&T. Otherwise, entities that have alleged overbilling of a tariffed telecommunications charge by a regulated telecommunications company. So if SB 183 were to apply to this proceeding, Sprint and AT&T would be limited to 2 years of overcharges that it could claw back from Ronan. The bill was amended during the legislative session to note that it is not retroactive. So it only applies to causes or liabilities presented to a customer after the effective date of the act. And I believe the effective date was on passage, but either way, it's after the date that Sprint and AT&T filed these complaints with the commission after discussing this issue with Ronan.
And so the legal import of the prospective, if you will, application of SB 183 is that the enactment of SB 183 does not, on its face, determine the outcome of our decision today because there is no retroactivity clause, correct?
Correct. Ronan notes that we should take the legislature's clearly expressed legislative intent on this issue, and for consistency purposes, adopt a 2-year statute of limitations. But that is, I think, not the correct way to read the legislative intent here. If the legislative intent was to make this apply retroactively, they would have made it apply retroactively.
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Gala. Any discussion or a motion? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to clarify some facts before making making a motion, if I may. Mr. Regala, please refresh my memory on this. It seems to me that there was a tariff in existence for some time that Ronan was billing AT&T, and I think it was level 3, I think at the time was the original party. And then AT&T was paying that without any dispute until such time. And the figure 17 years comes to mind that they were paying it for that period of time. And then they discovered this as, well, wait a minute, we think there's an error here. They brought that to the attention of the commission, and the commission agreed. I think the issue, if I recall correctly, was the reading of the tariff between one short phrase in the tariff, or the contention of Ronan was that it was I believe it was called the Four Corners Doctrine, taking the whole tariff as a whole, which seemed to be very convincing to me. My issue is can you clarify for me, at no time, as far as my memory serves me, did any of the parties aver that Ronan had done anything intentionally illegal? There was no accusation of malfeasance or willfully taking money that they knew wasn't theirs. Am I understand that correctly?
Chairman Brown, Commissioner O'Donnell, I believe that's correct. I don't know of anywhere in the record that alleges Ronan was intentionally defrauding AT&T and Sprint. Rather, this was a mutual mistake between all the parties involved.
Thank you.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, a little bit further if I could. And that is that, so at the point that AT&T, and I was amazed that their attorneys, which I imagine have a much greater amount of expertise and experience in these issues than those employed by Ronan, all difference due to Ronan's attorney. who was trained at the PSC, that by them paying Ronan's bill for so many years, it was basically agreeing or acceding to that. And then at the point that and this is what I'm not certain about, at the point that they discovered a difference on there, did AT&T then make their payments commensurate with their understanding of the tariff from that moment on?
Chair Brown, Commissioner O'Donnell, once the overcharge was identified, my understanding is that Sprint and AT&T, and you're right, one of these entities had a previous entity that it is now successor in interest. I can't remember which one now, but they brought this issue to Ronan for resolution, and they engaged in extensive discussions to try and resolve this issue without commission involvement. But because of the large dollar figures, they weren't able to do so, and they initiated these 3 proceedings: one, the declaratory ruling petition, and then the subsequent complaint proceedings. And my understanding is that after the declaratory ruling was released, Ronan refunded effectively 2 years of overcharges to Sprint and AT&T based on their conclusions of law that a 2-year statute of limitations applied. So I don't know if Sprint and AT&T stopped immediately paying the overcharge, or whether they kept paying while they were trying to negotiate the issue. But I presume as soon as they found out about it, they wanted to stop paying it, but I just don't know.
Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Gala, I want to thank you for underscoring the fact that this is a very an agenda item very narrow in its scope. We are not charged here today with coming up with some sort of resolution to the dispute, but rather simply defining one of the sideboards that will be part of that ongoing process. To that end, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt staff recommendation and establish the 5-year statute of limitations as applying in this docket, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Vice Chair Johnson has moved to adopt staff recommendation and apply a 5-year statute of limitations. Is there a second? I will second that motion. So Vice Chair Johnson's motion has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had my questions to Mr. Rogala were prior to making a motion myself. At this point, speaking to the motion at hand, my point is that absent any allegations of fraud against Ronan, it would seem to me that they can settle this issue between themselves, and that no statute of limitations would be applied here. Statute of limitations of repayment would indicate that somebody had accepted something illegally or unfairly. And I think that, as I say, up to the point that AT&T made their discovery or made their complaint, that everything prior to that was by mutual agreement. And in that regard, should have no repayment of any later determined overpayment. So I will oppose the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion? Interesting. Mr. O'Gala, just one question as to the applicability of Senate Bill 183. I believe there's a maximum in law that says that when the legislature takes an action say as to a particular statute of limitations. That is informative that perhaps the statute was not clear, that they're amending, and in fact may inform legal reasoning that the decision that was made by the legislature was not the correct interpretation for proceeding retroactively, if you follow what I'm saying. So what I'm asking, Mr. O'Gala, is can we infer from the fact that the legislature passed Senate Bill 183 that the 2-year statute of limitations was not the statute of limitations at the time that this proceeding started?
Chair Brown, I'm familiar with that maxim. And the problem with maxims, obviously, is that with statutory interpretation, there's always competing maxims. But if we take this one and apply it to this issue, if the assumption was that a 2-year statute of limitations applied, or that it was required for statutory liabilities, then you wouldn't need legislation to further double down on that 2-year statute of limitations. So I think your assumption is reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. O'Gala. I would agree with that interpretation. I would say this at this point in time. I would like to extend an apology on behalf of the commission to the parties in this case on the length of time it has taken to resolve this matter. I don't think it is reflected well on the commission, and I apologize for the delay in this matter, because as someone who practices law regularly, I find it extremely frustrating as an attorney to have matters sit for length of years. And so let me just extend that. So further discussion, I am going to support Vice Chair Johnson's motion. I took some time to dive into this matter. It's unfortunate for me that I wasn't able to hear these proceedings when they first started, and so I was coming to the party late. And I agree with staff analysis that this is really not one of those matters that it's clear on its face as to how to resolve. And so I agree that essentially the 5-year default provision is probably the applicable statute of limitations at this point. Additional discussion. All right, seeing no additional discussion, all those in favor of Vice Chair Johnson's motion to adopt a 5-year statute of limitations signify by, I'm going to do this roll call. I think this one's going to be close. Vice Chair Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
No.
Commissioner Pinochi. Aye. Commissioner Fielding.
No.
And then I am an aye. So the motion carries 3-2. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gall. I believe that takes care of our work session items for today. I would just remind the commissioners and those in the Bollinger Room and those listening to my voice here across the interwebs that we will have a 1 p.m. informational meeting. This is Northwestern Energy. We're going to discuss their long-term wildfire planning between initially noticing this up as long-term wildlife planning. I've had quite a struggle on this apparently. So 1 p.m. informational meeting, Northwestern Energy's long-term wildfire planning. So please listen in if you're interested. Commissioner Fielding.
Mr. Chairman, there's a question about the meeting. Will it be virtual only, or will we be meeting in person here in the Bollinger Room?
It was my understanding that it's either choice. I will be participating from the Bollinger Room, but commissioners may participate as they see fit.
And where will Northwestern staff be participating from?
That is not clear to me. Would you let?
All of the substantive presenters will be virtual.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further commission business before us, I adjourn this meeting.